Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Natalie Pelto, founder of Essential Modern Day Healers and now co-founder of Blue Life RX. And I'm here to talk to you guys about the microbiome and the microbiota. So, and specifically in relations to autism. So let's dive right in. Just a couple of concepts. This is more of a beginner video if you've never understood what the microbiome is, or this is like a term that you haven't heard. You may have heard the term leaky gut, but that is not a medically accepted term currently, but there are a lot of different ways to explain the concepts of leaky gut that are accepted in medical terms. But we're just going to dive into understanding how the gut microbiota affects autism. And this is something that I go at in length and talk about and actually what qualifies me is that I have a gut restoration specialty, including nutritional therapy and detoxification specialty. One of the things when we talk about autism that I'm going to state first is that there is a huge link, right? They call it the oh my goodness, dyslexia hitting me, the gut-brain axis. And so it means that our gut and our brain are linked through a vagus nerve. So it's a nerve that runs along the back of our spine. It is a very large nerve. It's also the nerve that is impacted by stress, and it really promotes and connects everything, really. Think about it as the nerve that connects everything. It also is impacted by, it impacts the heart rate variability, like in the world of autism, there are multiple ways that this nerve is impacting a child's behavior and sensory overload, we'll call it. And so the idea behind understanding the gut microbiota and the microbiome in relation to autism is that when, and this is 100% proven, so I don't care what comments I get on this, this is like, there's lots of data on this, and it's not to say that there's like, I'm not talking about two sides. I'm trying to bridge the two sides of, autism awareness and acceptance, with also the understanding that even if you accept and understand and absolutely have autism awareness, your child should and can have massive amounts of gains and hit milestones that will give them more independence as they grow older. Doctors are doing this all over the world currently, so it just has to be said that way. I am 100% supporter of whatever journey you decide to go on. It's just that there is such a spectrum in the autism world. There is a very big difference between high functioning and low functioning autism, where that independence is lacking. And we want to give our children the independence that they deserve. And so I'm going to educate you guys on the microbiome and how that can help support your child to hit milestones and gains. So first off, I'm going to say that the microbiome, you'll hear me talk about detoxification and nutritional therapy, and you'll hear me talk about the microbiome, and they're really all interlinked. Oftentimes when we think about illness or conditions or depletion, it's in relation to nutritional deficiencies and overtoxic exposure. So those two things lead to a depletion of our microbiome, which is, now we're going to say it, the fungi, bacteria, and viruses, and other species of bugs that live in our bowel system, on our skin, and throughout our body. So this is what the microbiome is. Now, people would think that this microbiome, it means that these bugs are bad for us. Well, the first thing I'm going to say is that there are bad bugs inside of us, and actually there always will be. It's when they overtake the land. We'll say that, like, we have basically an internal war, or like balance, that happens where there are white knights and dark knights, and the white knights are the good bacteria, fungi, and viruses, and other things, and they're really supportive to us. Actually, they have so many functions that some of the functions that we used to think were human are actually not. They're actually from our microbiome. So the idea behind the microbiome is, if you die, it dies, and if it dies, you die. So it is a completely synergistic system that works with us. What else does it do? So the microbiome, you can actually probably YouTube tons of videos on the microbiome, but what we call the compilation of trillions, guys, okay? The body has trillions of viruses inside of it, okay, good and bad. Okay, so let's just break that down a little bit. So there are trillions of all of these different species. Think of it as you are a planet, you are housing a whole bunch of species of things on you. And so in autism, it's the same thing. Now, how does that even start? Where does this even begin? Again, this is something that I dive into in great length in my course, but it starts actually before birth and then through the birthing process, dependent on what it was, will delegate what type of microbiome you begin to build. I can't go into a huge amount of detail on that because number one, of the length of the video, and number two, just understanding the concept is really what we're trying to get to at this point, is that the microbiome is formed. Now, there are specific things that happen in the autism progression, I'll call it, that we get exposed to that deplete or impact the microbiome in a negative way. Now, one of those things often that is asked when you are going through your diagnostic process, and I'm saying this from experience because I went through this, right? Like I had a son who was going through a severe nonverbal autism process and diagnosis, and he was deemed to no longer need it after we addressed microbiome proliferation over 2 years, because it takes years. It does, that's the honest truth. It does take 6 months to 2 years plus to even see a change in diversity and in even, sorry, not diversity, but in type of microbiome species. But it can happen. Okay, that's one thing. That's why fecal implants are so great. That they say for people have seen massive amounts of gains and milestone, but they only last for so long because it does take time for the microbiome to change and shift to be able to replenish. So, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit by saying that, but in all fairness, the concepts that I want you to leave with today is that each human being has a unique microbiome that is created at birth, and C-section births and natural births have completely different outcomes. Breastfeeding and non-breastfeeding, different outcomes of their microbiome. And so they are foundationally built in a very specific microbiota. Okay, now we can go deeper into that. That's something that is in the program that we talk about, like the enteric types. That's all being added to the Blue Life Autism program, where I educate on how to rebuild and replenish the microbiome after very specific actions of detoxification and nutritional therapy. But understanding that this is an area that you can start today to understand a little bit better and become educated on. It was a new thing that was discovered. It's not that old. The study of the microbiome is not that new either, but it's something that we in Western culture do not lean towards. Like, it's still not in our physicians' medical teachings. And don't get me wrong, like gastroenterologists and many physicians understand the concepts of the microbiome that they have decided to learn on their own, but not all of them are on the same page. This is extra education they have to do on their own term, on their own time, on their own terms. And so we do have to understand that there is a deficit in where we're at in our knowledge in our medical and healthcare field around the microbiome. We have to actually, I work with physicians, my partner is a physician, so I know this. I know that she is absolutely brilliant and extremely educated in the microbiome and in all of these things, but she had to go do extra schooling to do that. She had to go do extra educational understanding. So the studies are there. It takes about 10 years for them to catch up to be published. And so we don't really have 10 years right now in something that's already available and legit and for you guys to understand. So I hope this video gives you guys some understanding of what it is. Now, what does it do? And I'm just trying to make sure that I stay within timelines. Oh, I don't even think I turned on my thing. Okay. Anyways, what does it do? What does it do for us? Well, they say that it can do, so the microbiome can act as an extra layer of protection for your autism child to not have toxic materials be reabsorbed into the bloodstream through what they call a leaky gut. Now, to say that not in a layman's term is that our gut lining has these little ridges on it called villi. And unfortunately, there are barriers that usually help to protect and to keep all of that poop, we'll call it poop, we're not going to be fancy, from being reabsorbed. So there's toxins. We know that poop is toxic, right? It's all the stuff we don't use. That's why it's an excrement and we get rid of it. It's not usable by the body. Okay, so and we know that autistic children generally have dysregulation in their bowel patterns, and they generally have a very, very depleted, low nutrient diet, sometimes so depleted, I am actually floored sometimes that children who, the way that they eat today are even able to function at all. Okay, because what we eat is what creates us. The cellular structures that we have, the cells are created by proteins and RNA and mRNA and DNA. And all of that is built off of the foods that we eat. And yet we still resist this knowledge, this actual factual knowledge that has been, given to us, and everything on the planet that we have access to gears us for success. It's only the man-made stuff that we have created, and I hate to point out myself, but we have created, that causes dysregulation in the body. And how that impacts the microbiome is that when we eat crappy food, and we'll call it toxic food, so chips, McDonald's, high fat oils, trans fats, I can go on and on. Oh, chicken fingers. Yeah, I'm going to say it. I know I was the chicken finger mom, so I'm going to say it. It just is what it is. No, there is absolutely no time where you would feed your kids chicken fingers that were created in a lab that are full of trans fat oils that is going to be healthy. Someone tried to convince me of that the other day, and I just shook my head. But sugar, right? Things that have food colorings. Those are like 2 food colorings together actually increases toxicity levels, sometimes up to 7 times. Yeah, that's the power of what we're giving our children. So if this is an eye opener for you guys, I hope that it's done in a way that is nice. It's something that I talk about at length, and it's something that does get me pretty frustrated. But what happens when we ingest those things, it goes into our microbiome, and it actually creates an environment where the bad bacteria can actually overtake the good microbiome, so the good bacteria. It creates an environment of toxicity. And then what happens is that barrier that can allow for, that's protecting your children from having that toxic exposure and waste reabsorbed, actually now becomes depleted, and there becomes the cellular ability, the cellular separation that some toxic material can go back. Now, what happens with that toxic material? Well, it's going to go throughout the body. It's going to go through the bloodstream. It's going to go through the brain. It's going to create, especially trans fats, they're going to go up there, and they're going to block and create massive amounts of sensory issues. So again, it's not about, the thing with autism is that it is a spectrum, and we've all had different exposures. We all have a different microbiome. There is no cure for autism. There is no cure for cancer, because it is an umbrella term. And it's frustrating when we hear those things, yes, but it's an umbrella term that means that it's literally overlooking multiple different conditions, right? We know that autistic children are more prone to infections. We know because their immunity is so depleted, because guess where it's found? In your microbiome. Your microbiome is your immune support. You literally have 75% of your immunity in your gut. And if you're not feeding that good things, then yes, you're going to be more prone to infections. My son had infections throughout his entire beginning life. Some of the questions that come up, and I'm just trying to be quick here to make sure you guys get all this information, but some of the things doctors ask you, has your child had a lot of antibiotics? Guess what kills the microbiome? Antibiotics, lots of it. Is your child a picky eater? Yeah, because there's no nutrient capacity. So yes, it's going to deplete the microbiome. You're not feeding it fibers. There's very specific foods to feed the microbiome to help it grow, to help it live, to help it beat out the bad bacteria. So I hope, and so the term microbiota, if it's your first time hearing it, it's the combination of all the species that you are housing in and outside of your body that make up your microbiome. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I know that I have to cut it short just because for time's sake, but I hope that it gives you an idea. So the reason this video actually came to be, a mom specifically asked me about glyphosate. I had a rant, like a huge rant about glyphosate. And I want to share a little bit about some of the most toxic substances in the world, and glyphosate being one of them, which glyphosate is like, it's either Roundup or a derivative of Roundup. It's a pesticide. And it's something that's sprayed on foods all the time. And we're at a point now where, so through my nutritional therapy program, like they literally gave me the definition of organic. And organic means that it has not been tampered with any type of GMO'd anything. And so when I see posts and I see that there are actual organic and non-GMO materials that are testing positive for glyphosate, that frustrates me, because it tells me that there is a lie happening, and those companies should be held accountable for fraud. And it should be serious, because some doses, many doses, like even small doses of glyphosate one of the things you'll notice, and this is something that has been talked about, is that children who live in areas that have high glyphosate fields near them have more autism locationally. That should tell you a huge story, right? The other thing that comes up is that, you know, there's quite a few, well, I'll say a couple of studies that I have seen where they share that glyphosate in just one dose, you can actually see pictures of it, depletes the gut cell membrane by massive amounts. And so imagine if you're eating that on your Cheerios every day, Cheerios being one of the highest in glyphosate, by the way. So imagine if you're eating this and it's not, and the thing is that they're like, well, it's safe and just, you know, it's safe, it's FDA approved for small doses. Okay, but if you're eating it on if you have an autistic child who's only eating one thing or three things, your variety of foods, let's just say in autism is 4 different things. We'll say the most common ones might be pizza, chicken fingers, French fries, McDonald's, glyphosate factory, and GMO factory, inflammation factory. So just say they're eating only those 4 things. How big is that exposure now? That exposure has gone from being minimal to maximum, right? And so what happens to the gut wall? And so what happens to our children who have autism or are considered autistic? Over time, if they continue on that path, they have higher rates of chronic illnesses, they have higher rates of cancers. So this is not to scare you guys, but it's just, we need a wake-up call when it comes to our children. And autism is one of the biggest wake-up calls that you can get. And it is 100% able to see milestones and gains when food is addressed. That's why foundationally, most of the things I do are food-based. I have seen many other people talk about different therapies. I've seen many people talk about different products. But at the end of the day, if the world exploded and we didn't have access to all those products, then what are we left with? We're left with food. So we need to work with what is going to be sustainable and make sure that that food becomes re-sustainable, and we address the depletion in our earth. We address this use of like glyphosate. If you cannot farm on you would never be able to do organic farming on a glyphosate field for something like 10 to 20 years. That's how much it depletes our earth. So I'm going to end it there. A little bit of a rant, but I think it was really important to talk about all those things. I covered a lot. I covered the microbiota. You should have a basic understanding now of what that is, how it looks like in our bodies. I covered a little bit about the things that impact it, which, by the way, detoxification is a huge one. So I have 2 programs that I educate massively on how to address this, which are the conscious detox, that I have an entire section and module just for kids to be able to go through it safely with just food. And I also have the Blue Life Autism program to bring you from literally, there's no program like it. It is the only program you'll generally ever need. Actually, it's the only program you'll ever need to make sure that you get to give your child more independence and milestones. Okay, my rant is over. I hope that you guys got some value out of this video, and I will talk to you guys later.